All right. Okay, guys. So today we're going to be looking at a couple things, three things in particular. First one is going to be the contractor's growth chart. And one of the things that we're looking to improve is understanding what category each one of our trainings belongs in. Okay, so a big mistake we can make, and I'm going to take full accountability to this and not explaining it sooner in these trainings, is explaining at what level or what area you need to be doing the actual tool or asset that I'm sharing. Okay, at which level it would apply. So I want to make this really, really clear, kind of for everybody, how contractors evolve and what you need to be focused on for the level of business that you're doing. Okay. So hopefully this is going to bring some clarity. And then moving forward, it's also going to allow you to see what you need to focus on in your business. Okay. So I have an asset I'm going to share with you. And what we're looking at here, first and foremost, is a couple of things. All right. So we're going to look at basically the phases of a contractor. Okay. And how we should be looking at our business. So first thing is generally how contractors grow. All right. So we're all in different phases of our business. But at each phase, so at each startup phase, we have a crisis. Okay. And it's unavoidable. And in fact, companies who fight it spend a lot more time in that crisis. All right. Companies that don't recognize it, don't see it. So my objective today is to help you guys to really recognize where you might be in the scale, and then to help you move past whatever area that you're struggling with, and move forward into the next phase of your business, or decide, hey, you know what, that phase might not be a great fit for me. I'm going to avoid that one, and I'm happy where I am. Okay, so with every business, we got to look at things as in terms of size and age. Okay, so that's kind of the scale and balance that we're going to look at. Every business kind of in the startup phase is really just struggling to get work, really just struggling to get jobs, struggling to get consistency from that 0 to 250,000. That's a tough road. Okay, but there's still things that we can do to accelerate the amount of success that we have. Okay, you're not bound by time; it's bound by knowledge. Okay, it's bound by systems, plans, controls, and people. Okay. But with all that said, as you go beyond being in startup, all right, and we start to stabilize, we run into our first crisis. And that crisis is leadership. Okay. Although most contractors in general tend to be okay leaders, it's leadership overall in terms of your business. A lot of times, because we don't have vision, we're not projecting where we want to be. We haven't planned. You can see a lot of complacency set in, even with yourself. And again, where a lot of contractors kind of, have a big problem is being able to attract and have other people believe in their mission and vision. Right. So that's kind of the first level of crisis that we're going to run into. And leadership also applies to yourself. So keeping yourself focused, keeping, you can be a single man operation and still be experiencing something along these lines. All right. The next one is as we move past the stabilization. All right. What we end up running into is in the next is really the growth phase. So that's from basically $1 million to $3 million. Okay. In growth, we struggle with autonomy. Okay, now I would say the majority of members we work with are in this phase. Okay, and the autonomy crisis is pretty cut and dry. It's systems and people. Okay, so how do I operate efficiently? How do I have consistency throughout my business? Because now we have a lot more moving parts. All right. And the owner is really kind of, bouncing around wearing multiple hats. And it's very difficult to really move the business forward. And we start to actually rely on other people. Okay. This is the beginning of where the business is bigger than the owner, meaning that if everything falls down, all right, the owner can't save it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep.
So the next phase, and again, we should all hope that we end up in this one is the establishment phase. Okay. And where we run into a big problem in the establishment phase, I've personally began to go through this, is control crisis. Okay. So in my own personal experience, giving up control to be a better leader was a big step for me. Okay. So meaning up to this point, the owner has full control of the business. All right. If everything's been set up and running properly, but that comes with some consequences. And what happens in this phase is that we have to start hiring COOs and other people to actually operate our business for us. Right. We got to have people that we trust. You're going to have an executive level, team in place. And as you move to that point, the bigger issue becomes is I've lost control. Right. And it's a big step. Right. So, when we get to this point, hopefully you all do, that'll be kind of the crisis that exists. Now, moving beyond that, that's where it's, a corporation, a large corporation. I'm not going to go any further than the other one, but it's essentially where we run into our red tape crisis. This is basically when we've gotten so big in our local area that we can't grow anymore, and we have to move into a provincial or national position. So we run into a lot of red tape and restrictions with your business, right? Distance. So that's kind of the growth spurt that every business, it's not just particularly tied to contractors, but that's what every kind of business goes through. Okay, so let's talk about the phases now. This is what's going to apply to you guys. All right, so where most of you guys are going to be, and now you may have some of these things on this list, you may have them implemented in your business, some of them you might not. Okay, what I want you to think about is each one of these are the pillars of your business. Okay, so time and production, profit and operations, sales and marketing. These are the main pillars to your business. Okay, below that are the actual systems and processes you need or require at that level. So from 0 to 250,000, what should we focus on in time and production? All right, and again, seeing hundreds of contractors go through this, there's some standardized things that I feel are the quintessential, the most important things that they need to implement in terms of systems and processes. Okay, so the very first one, because now we're going to have a team of 1 to 3, all right, that we're having daily stand-up meetings. Okay, that's where we're coordinating and getting on the same page. These can be done just like it sounds. We can have a stand-up meeting where we're all communicating in one spot. The reason why a lot of the problems happen because of lack of communication. All right. So stand-up meetings can also be done in a Zoom call. There's lots of ways to do it, but the most important kind of thing that we want to do is making it consistent so that we're solving problems, at a designated time. Okay. And then we don't get into the habit or teach our staff to get into the habit of constantly running back to us with their problems. Right. There has to be a designated time when we're going to solve the problems, because you're the owner and you're still working, right? And we're talking at certain things. We want to get our team members, even if we have a small team, and we want to get ourselves into the habits of doing this. Okay. Number 2, which is a part of planning, is job descriptions. Okay. What's the expectations you have for everyone in your business? And this can be simple. We don't have to get complex, but it has to be meaningful. Okay. So the other thing that I highly encourage is writing the job descriptions for the roles you haven't filled yet. Okay. So again, thinking about your business and, what would have to be there, now and into the future, and when are we going to hire that person? What are they going to do? What are their roles, tasks, responsibilities? Imagine that person already exists. Okay. Big one here, time management objectives. All right. This, I can't stress to you enough in terms of protecting your time. You are no longer a contractor, all right, or a tradesman. You're becoming, a contractor, all right? Your job and responsibility as a contractor is obviously to optimize your time, but we want to start to implement scheduling into our business. So calendars, Gantt charts, things like that. Even if you're running small jobs, it's not for you. It's for your future you. Okay. But getting these habits built now are going to make all the world of difference. Okay. And again, we have a little bit more time on our hands, hopefully. All right. Where if you try to move into the next phase and you don't have these, your business is going to really suffer and you're going to suffer. Okay. Now, a lot of guys, and I'm going to stress this, I've seen guys that are level 4 in marketing, but a level 1 in time and team. What do you think that does? Yeah.
Just like me, it's probably like all over the place.
And I'm going to make this really, really clear. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, entirely. I just want you to kind of get the gist of what exactly needs to be there. And this is a checklist. So I'm going to be sharing this with you. And we're also going to start labeling our training. Okay. So I want you guys to understand that every training that I'm doing, all right, falls within these categories. So the first one is in startup phase. So your job costing, like I did last week, that's the system that you need to have, all right, in startup. So many contractors don't have it. Okay. And you have to maintain it and keep it in place. All right. So again, coming back to these are the cinder blocks. These are the foundation of your business, your cash flow management. Everyone needs to have that at this level, because moving beyond that without having that fundamental thing in place is going to, it's going to cause you problems. So here I'll explain it. All right. Let's just imagine we're building a house. Okay. Best way I can explain it. At the base of our business is why we're doing it. All right. That's the foundation, the bedrock, of our company. And it's based on our core values and principles. Like, why are we running this business? What is it about our business that, makes it unique? And what are we going to stand for? Right. So some of you, maybe I'm going to be the best top-notch, contractor in the game. I'm going to do the best quality work. That's the part of your core value. That's what makes it up who you are. Where someone else might be like, I'm in it to make money. Right. So again, no matter what, we started a business for a reason. Okay. Now, moving beyond that, if we're trying to build this house, we have to look at each pillar. Okay. So pillar one, in my opinion, is time. All right. There's nothing more important for you to understand, and your business will not succeed until you get control of your time. Okay. And just like I said, we've got cinder blocks that go with that time, right? So in startup, there's tasks and there's objectives that you need to complete. These are the cinder blocks that are going to make up all of these pillars. All right. So they're based on your core values. The next, we've got team. All right. Again, there's levels to it, right? So, in startup, team, is going to have a certain set of tasks to master before we can move to stabilization. Okay. We have profit. We have operations pillar. All right. We have our marketing pillar. And we have our sales pillar. Okay. Below that, we have our cinder blocks. Each one of these represent a level. Okay. Now, above that is our vision and mission. This is what we're doing it all for. This is the end game in mind. All right. What's your vision? What's your mission? Like, these things are the things you're working towards. And it's the ultimate sign of where we've gotten to our destination. Okay. For some of you, again, you may only want to go to growth, right? You may only want to be in that $1 to $3 million range. It doesn't make sense for you to be working on things above that. All right. And you're going to see in the charts that like it gets complicated and more sophisticated as you move up, as there's more moving parts, right? So decide where you want to be. If your goal is to have a really, profitable business, you want to make $400,000 to $500,000. I mean, growth, first level of growth is about as far as you want to go, but you have to be equal across your foundation. All right. Or this is what happens. Your fucking roof falls off, right? The business crashes. And so many of us are in this role where we're building our marketing up. All right. But we haven't got control of our time. What's that do to the house? It falls down. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with everything else that you're trying to do. And again, you can't fight this. It's not something that is optional or you're the exception to. All right. After, again, seeing hundreds of contractors go through this and myself going through it, avoiding the areas where you feel like you're not strong is only ultimately accelerating your consequences and potential to go out of business. Okay. Because no matter what way you want to slice it, one serves the other. We've got 6 main pillars to our business, and we have to remain focused on evenly building those pillars up, not rushing through, making sure we're maintaining and keeping systems in our business that serve a purpose. Okay. So when I'm going through these trainings, what I'm going to start to do is label each one. All right. And I have trainings for all of startup, all of stabilization, all of growth. And there's no one really here that's beyond that. We have even a few that we were talking about, last week that would have been in a growth, requirement. All right. So that might be confusing for some of you. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a check. No matter where you think you are, all right, we're going to check it and we're going to find out where your imbalances are and focus on the areas that you're not strong in versus the areas that you are strong in. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, being really good at marketing is very dangerous to most companies. Okay. If they don't have the financial controls and planning and operations, like I've seen so many more disasters, it doesn't help. It makes things worse, right? So yeah. Any questions on this? Oh, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like my story is I'm confident in my desire to get good at marketing and desire to get a good sales.
Yep.
And then like I find myself like when you talk about the different stages of entrepreneurship or whatever, like obviously my brain gets going is, oh, we can make this thing huge, right?
Right.
Because I can market and sell, but then all of a sudden I know where I'm weak.
Right.
Like really weak, and you already know that. I don't need to explain that to you.
Right. Absolutely. And listen, you're not alone. So like the goal and objective of this is to and again, a lot of these things are from personal experience. So like what do we need to have at a fundamental base? Like where are the checkpoints? So again, and what are we going to delegate? So a lot of us that aren't great at accounting and bookkeeping, that's not an excuse, because eventually if you're weak in that pillar, your marketing is going to overwhelm and you're going to topple your house, right? So where I think we lack some clarity, and what I'm attempting to do here is to describe and have, what does that look like, right? Like what is the exact systems that we need to have at what level, and what do we need to be focused on? Because it's too easy to focus on one thing that we think is going to bring the results and forget everything else. Meanwhile, you may achieve that goal. So let's say you become the badass marketer and salesperson, you turn around and you're bankrupt anyways because you weren't able to manage the cash. So like, does it play any role there, right? And vice versa. I see a lot of companies that ignore sales and marketing being the weak link. They may be really good at managing their cash, but they're broke, right? Like again, they don't bring in enough opportunity. And I think that the road is littered with more contractors like that are really great at what they do. They were good managers and good, like, at delivering the product and service, but they just could not create opportunities. So what's the pathway? What's the answer to this? Is that we have to really look at what should I be focusing on, and instead of looking for all the shiny objects, the things that we're consciously aware of, we have to start looking at the things that we may not be aware of that are going to cause us the grief in the future. That's really my, what I'm trying to bring with the value of this. Now, again, we're going to adapt and keep to evolving this, but I feel it's very accurate. And what you guys may be surprised to find out is like your imbalances in your business. And a lot of times, I can't say this in my own experience, you get to a certain point where you've done everything right, okay, but there's 6 unknowns, right?
Yeah.
That are like ideas and things that you heard of or anything, but what is it? Like again, where do I start to diagnose or fix the problem? And then you get opinions from people that could be at different levels, and that misleads you, right? Because again, and I'm taking full accountability for this. I may have been doing this myself, and it took a kind of a wake-up call for myself to kind of realize that some of the things I talk about are at level 3 or 4, way over people's heads. And by me saying, like, making the impression, it's a classic, like, guru kind of move. It like talk at a high level, get everyone excited about something that is unnecessary for the level that they're at. And it would be a distraction for them to focus on what I'm saying, but they do anyways, right? So we jump for these things and we get caught up, and it keeps us, again, inadvertently just running in circles. So when I'm having these discussions moving forward, I'm always going to label where that block is. So again, take a couple hours a week. Even if you go back to startup phase, you'll probably be surprised how many of the blocks are not actually completed. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. So like so going back to the top of the house picture, right?
Yeah.
Like you would recommend someone saying, okay, well, like I've done enough work. Like I'm already confident, like I'm beating all my sales targets and my lead generation targets. Like I've done enough work at this point that I'm confident I'm going to hit my year-end sales target,
Mhm.
right? I might want to chill for a bit and be like, okay, we still need to put more effort into cash flow
Right.
management.
Totally. I
Does
can't.
that make sense?
Yeah. So, but here's, it makes sense. But let me ask you something. Are you currently managing your cash flow? Is it a system and process that just operates?
Considering the state of how tightly we're managing cash flow, yeah, we're updating on a day-to-day basis, projecting out 30 days.
Okay. Well, that's actually a startup. Like the forms I was sharing last week, you should be out 12 weeks. All right. But that's your first objective in startup, right? Like job costing, cash flow management, like your banking, accounting, all that stuff. And again, these are basic things. If you're missing one of these, you're missing a cinder block. All right. And then trying to skip ahead to the next one, you're not going to be able to. You're always going to have this holdback. And a lot of us misinterpret that as being our team resisting us. Or why can't I just do it? I got an accountant and I still don't know what my numbers are. Like I hear this all the time, but really it's coming back to the basic level, right? You cannot expect your accountant, bookkeeper, or someone you hire for all I care, if you don't have the system and process in place and understand it yourself, right? The discipline of doing it regularly. And when you get busy, it doesn't just go away, right? So we're going to talk about some of these things. And then as you think about it, like level one estimating evolves, it gets more sophisticated, it gets faster. And the danger of me talking about things like AI is that trying to take a level 4 AI estimating approach when you don't know the bedrock fundamentals, you don't have job cost codes and stuff, you want to talk about a disaster, like it will never work for you. You'll get frustrated and then you'll get passed by the people who did do the, the fundamental basics. Like it's going to expose you if you have any weakness in your structure, because it makes everything go faster, right? Getting good at marketing faster, right? Sales faster. Production's weak, don't have any controls, no team, no time. You don't have a way of recruiting and hiring. Like, bam, there you go. Like you can have all the work in the world you want. You have a shit team to do it, you're going to have a rough ride, right? You don't have quality controls in place. You don't have, these other things. So now's the time to reflect on what we don't have, all right, or where we need to work and focus on those spots consistently, improving them, right? But I think overall, I don't think a lot of contractors have a clear pathway of what they need at what level. What should I be focusing at and improving? So my attempt here is and this is my first attempt at this, is to give you just a very clear way to know where you stand and where in your business you have weaknesses, and what exact training and system that you can do, what you should implement rather than trying to do everything at once. Let's focus on one thing, get it in place, right? Make sure it's working, maintain it, and then move to the next. Does that make sense? So it's more of a systematic way to grow your business. Okay. So, any other questions? Right. So, to basically start on the conversation we're having, I'm going to label our first training. The first training that we're going to do is the labor burden calculator, and this is actually a startup process. Okay. So labor burden is everything that costs money above and beyond what your employees' wages are. Okay. So if we pay an employee $30 an hour, we all know that we have other additional expenses that go on to that. So today is about figuring out what that number is and knowing what it costs us per hour for to have a person in the field. So starting with the indirect costs, indirect expenses. Again, we're going to look at a couple of key areas that we want to really dig in on. For service companies, especially guys that have technicians, I look a lot at the non-billable hours, or like if you have design, if you're pricing design, I'm going to put that all on my staff members per man. Okay. So again, if we're offering free estimates, I put that as a non-billable expense and I spread that over all of my hourly rate. Okay. I know it's a little bit different than you probably know, and you would say that's an overhead expense. But the problem with like assuming that's your overhead is number one is how are you recovering it? Okay, so again, for an estimate, like how many, if you're closing, 2 and 10, all right, you've paid to do 10. How much time did that take? How, like, none of that's billable. So what I like to do is take that and push it into my hourly rate. Okay. And then anything that's surplus to that, I'm going to cover in my overhead. All right. You don't necessarily have to do that. PMs, supervision, cell phones, any training you're doing, uniforms, small tools or supplies. We get into the gas and oil for the truck. Again, based on the employee, they're the ones using it. They're the ones that have direct influence on it. All right. Again, we're gonna make sure that we've got a budget put in on that staff member. Okay. And once you set this, it will be pretty standard for everyone coming in. Okay. Next, we're going to check out what it actually costs us per hour.
Sorry, Jay, you have one of those per employee?
I do it, yeah. So, and I'm going to explain to you kind of my method. Use the method that works best for you, but I want to get as much built into this because it's, and again, like looking at it from technician and service perspective, being off, like for example, like if your technician is only 70% utilized on average, all right, where's that extra money coming from?
Yeah.
So you're underbilling on your hourly rate, right? We have to take those things into consideration, and I definitely do. So like I know in my service, and we monitor, it's one of our key KPIs is like utilization. Okay. So if you have a technician that you're paying a full-time wage to that is only 70% billable, okay, you should be putting that expense into his hourly rate so it's recovered.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Same thing with builders and, anything that you're doing that's design, stuff like that. Like just think of all those other expenses, if you didn't, like if you weren't including them, where are you picking up the thing? And what a lot of guys do is they try to increase their overhead rate, and they're not like offsetting it. Okay, so they also keep a static overhead number. So let's say again we calculated our overhead 2 years ago at 28%, and we've been rolling with that number. Okay, but since then, our productivity's gone down. We've bought new trucks. We have other things going on. Well, is your overhead still 28%? No. What about if you have it on a bad month, right? So you've been down in revenue. Have you got a way of recovering that overhead expense, right? So I'm going to talk to you guys about that one shortly as well. So in the calculator here, we're going to look at what we estimate to pay them. What are their estimated hours paid, right? So most employees, 40-hour work week, 42 weeks of the year, we're looking at about 2,080 hours standard. Okay. This is built for, I believe this is one's built for Ontario too. No. Yeah, it is. Okay. Next is what our gross pay rate is. Okay. Any other benefits that you provide? All right. What is it as a percentage of the pay? All right. CPP, workers' comp, all of those things you want to put in as like what the percentage is and be able to break them down. Okay. And then, of course, we've got our 6 vacation days, non-billable hours. Like I said, the calculation in there, indirect costs will be included. I like to use it as a percentage. The reason I use mine as a percentage, and back to your question, Johnny, is mine spread over all of my staff. So when I bring in another staff member, right, or add someone to our team, we do take that into consideration because it does increase our indirect costs. So again, we adjust everybody's billable hour at that rate. Does that make sense? So like, again, getting it down to a 25% or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then our vacation days, these are again, standard mandatory, right? So we have 9 stat holidays. In Ontario, we're allowed 3 sick days, 10 vacation days, right? So we want to make sure that those are being calculated into our calculation. All right. So this gives you a very clear view of how much that person's going to cost you by the year. All right. Any bonuses, commissions, I suggest that you have them below the line, again, because you're going to claim those differently in taxes. I'm not going to get into all that stuff right now, but our fully burdened hour for somebody that's 31.25 is actually 47.90. total burden. Okay. Pretty crazy. That's a 28% labor burden rate. So when we're looking at our job cost calculator, this is where you're going to get that number from. Okay. So you can include that, or you just take the fully burdened hour rate for your man, and then you'll put them into the job cost calculator and you just put the labor burden at 0. Okay. I like to use the indirect, and I like to use the full burdened percentage. So it's like 28 or 53 or whatever.
So you're going ahead and adding your overhead, like your office costs.
Everything. So no, not into employees. No. So let me be very clear. So indirect costs is anything to do with the employer staff member. So like their productivity, all that kind of stuff. You want to
like
take
their
that.
truck,
Yeah.
truck, their cell phone, all that stuff, because I gotta pay you to drive around no matter what, your gas, your maintenance on your vehicle.
So you can, yes. And again, if you're running a service calculation, what I should make maybe clearer about is there's other, like if you have a direct service technician, you're going to increase these indirect costs, right? So you may put the full, expense of the truck onto their fully burdened hour. If you're billing by the hour, if you're charging by the hour, okay. So like in a service example, so you're a HVAC technician, okay. Of course, the truck, the fuel, all of that stuff would be as a part of your billable hour, okay. You wouldn't necessarily, you would break it down depending on how you want to see it. I mean, some will use an overhead rate. All right. And what happens with that, and I'm just going to explain it really quickly, is that if you're going to do it with that method, is that you have to do a monthly overhead recovery rate calculation. Okay. So the best way I can say this is, let's say, in December, we had $25,000 worth of, billable hours, right? And then in January, we had $12,000. Okay. Would your overhead stay the same? No, of course not. It's based on revenues, right? It's based on, because you have variable costs in there. So what we're going to do is recalculate and then add that loss or the gain into the next month, so that you're recovering the loss from the previous month, or it may affect your pricing. So we're seeing the opposite happen right now as we're deflating. Okay. And we're cutting costs and everything else. Our overhead has actually dropped. So now we can be more competitive with our pricing. But if I continue to run the same number that I was using during COVID, all right, it would put me out of some markets, especially if they're really tight and they're really, and it's giving you bad data, right? So by not getting this overhead recovery rate, again, you're assuming that your overheads haven't fluctuated or changed, and they do, right?
And the biggest overhead cost that's associated with field staff is going to be the vehicles and the equipment or whatever it is.
Yeah, it can be, depending on which markets that you're in. But in general, it's their actual time that's the biggest cost, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and again, if like for service technicians, you are going to put that into their hourly billable rate. You would use that calculator. That way it's fixed into the hour rate, right? And then you know how many hours you need to bill in order to break even. And then when you're in a profit zone. Okay. And then it reduces the potential for error on your overhead recovery rates, but you still do them either way, right? So again, it's just what category you're putting them into. Okay. Any of this make sense? Anybody have any questions on this?
I had one question, Jay.
Sure.
That previous document that you showed about for a labor burden calculator.
Yep.
Now, is that supposed to be under knowing your labor burden? And there's supposed to be a form or Excel thing at the bottom, because is it supposed to be at the bottom of knowing your labor burden in Contractor, Accelerator Pro there?
Yeah, so it's in our Money Master.
Right.
Okay. And I haven't. Yeah, so I haven't. I'm pulling it out today, so it'll be uploaded. So if you're in Money Master,
yeah,
here's where it will go. Right here.
Right.
So we're just doing the training in the video now.
Okay, because I looked at one of the other ones here, and it had the form at the bottom.
Yeah, it's going to be attached at the bottom tonight.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah,
okay, okay. I was looking for that form.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so next, guys, any questions about that before I move on about the labor burden? I am going to be doing an updated training for service technicians specifically because you guys have a different calculation and a way to look at it and calculate it. So I'll do the training and I'll send it all out to you guys just to give you clear insight on how and what is best practice. Okay.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
two big, yeah, go ahead.
because like we have hourly rates for our service technicians, and like you can't really adjust that 121 month, $100 next month kind of thing, right? So
No, and that's where I think I wanted to be clear. So again, this rate would apply, like let's say you're an electrician and you're doing big bidded projects, all right, because it's more again specific, and like you have a crew, like that's where you would really look at it this way. But a service technician, somebody that's again any type of service, that any type of service work, we're going to totally calculate it differently, and there's a lot more things that we have to include that are above the line.
okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. So next we're going to talk about our WIP. All right. So does anybody know what WIP is?
Work in progress.
There we go. All right. And what's the purpose of a WIP calculation?
Knowing your
See,
backlog.
Go ahead, Jeremy. I mean, Johnny.
I was gonna say, just knowing your backlog and how much more work you can take on.
Okay. Yeah, it has quite a bit to do with that.
See where the job is going.
And what about overbilling and underbilling? So on a
That's very
big
important too.
projects, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it's actually a big crisis in our business, in our industry. Most of the time, general contractors will keep their sub trades underbilled. Okay, do you know why? Anybody have any ideas of why that would be beneficial to the general contractor?
So they can use our money.
You got it. So they get what they want to do is bill more to the bank or the financer, right? So they'll bill, let's say 80% of your work, and then they'll take 10% off yours and 15 or whatever. All right. Or hope that you miss an invoice period so that they can use that cash to operate their business and they don't have a dime of their money invested into the project. Okay. It's been going on for a long, long time. And where we're seeing, where the crisis is coming from is that builders aren't just doing it on one single project. They're multiplying it across multiple projects. And what happens at that point is that all of it slows down, and it actually makes a builder could be inefficient and losing money on projects. All right. And you're paying the fee of that. All right. So if there's ever a Ponzi scheme that I've ever seen, it's that. Right. The whole general contractor and the slow payment thing is really what's held back our industry in so many ways. And I think it's coming to a head. We're seeing Ontario's regulations change, but I think in the future, and as long as contractors start to become more aware of it, especially if you're doing larger, infrastructure, even, sub trades working for builders. All right. The time to now kind of push back against them and refuse long payments. Anything over 15 days for me requires them to pay me an interest rate. Okay. For you guys, I want you to start to think that way as well. There are plenty of bad credit clients that you shouldn't be doing business with, and you may or may not know that. So I know I've talked to you guys a lot about checking your customers, checking their credit ratings, making sure that you know who you're doing business with. We've even gone to the level now, because we're using the Equifax system. We're checking residential clients. All right. Anyone building a house. All right. Very important, because they may have not qualified for a mortgage, or the difference between a closing construction mortgage and the mortgage they have to get from the bank. What happens when you get to the end of the project and you're moving from your construction mortgage to your actual mortgage? All right. Some people don't qualify anymore. So now what? What's going to happen? There's going to be a whole bunch of, and we're seeing a ton of that, right? So again, I have projects like in our business where the client was overextended, all right, and they're making settlements now with us for pennies on the dollar, right? Insolvent. The house was foreclosed on. We're screwed, right? Don't let that be you. Okay. And that wasn't a contractor problem. Now, although we checked our contractor, but you know, they're not going to take on that brunt. It comes back down to you. So know your customer. In that situation, I don't just ask for the contractor's financial information. I find out who owns the house, and I find out what their credit ratings are and what shape they're in. Okay. Because I'm not doing business with anybody that could potentially not pay me. Okay. So other situations that you want to keep aware of for checking credit as well. Property managers, believe it or not, a lot of property managers are also owners of some of the real estate, and they become the property manager, and we're seeing, because of the higher interest rates, that they're becoming insolvent. Okay. I've seen in the last couple of months as well, property managers that are now trying to become the general contractor. Like, don't get caught up in that stuff. Be really aware of who you're doing business with. And make sure that the company you're potentially working with isn't in financial trouble already. And the signs are, have they got claims against them? Have they got lawsuits? Like, do they have things pending? All of that stuff is public information, so I suggest that you check. Okay. So
where do you check that?
So you can get an Equifax plan. So if you go to Equifax, I think the first starter package is like $600, and you can just pull a public or personal credit rating on someone.
Okay, so all the builders, all the
Exactly. Yeah. So again, don't, and here's the thing, people don't recognize this. Like, it's impossible to tell what's behind the curtains, right? So even a client that was a good paying client in the past doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good client now. And again, out of the woodwork, we're getting like plans thrown at us out of everywhere, right? Like, you'll notice that as the interest rate changed, people are getting a lot more pricing, aren't they? People are being a lot more careful with who they're doing business with. When that happens, okay, I know why. What happens? Builders who are screwing subs on other trades will all of a sudden have this pile of work for you, right? Don't fall for that, because they're already in trouble, right? So again, maybe they have projects that have where owners, ran out of cash. They have all these financial problems that are now their problem, and they're going to be looking for whose pocket they can get that money out of, right? Because they don't want to ever use their own in most cases, right? And the way some contracts are written fully leaves you liable for it. So just don't play that game. Only really safe place, I would say, is like in your government contracts. But even there, like, there's so much bureaucracy and red tape. Like, you better have a very good endurance for bullshit, because you're going to get it. Nonetheless, let's move on, and we'll talk about our next tool here. And to further the discussion around the WIP. Give me 1 second. So our WIP would fall into our establishment or our growth phase. Okay. Sorry, I'm just getting used to where'd my document go.
And that would also be a consideration too, is that if you're getting into bigger jobs, that you can withstand being without that amount of holdback for that amount of time out of your cash flow. So you could win 3 jobs and you could sink your ship.
100%. Yep, you're bang on there. So, and we see that all too often. So, does anybody know what the #1 cause of bankruptcy actually is in the construction market, and what the underlying factors are?
Cash flow.
Cash flow, baby. That's you've got, again, and as your business grows and as you get more opportunities, not being able or capable of managing your cash flow, all right, is why businesses go out of business. It's not even profit. They could be making a ton of cash, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced it, right? Where we're making 50, 60% margin. One big project that's slow paying all of a sudden sucks all of the capital you have out of the business, and you're incapable of properly performing on other jobs. Then we start to make dumb decisions. And again, once a big general senses the blood in the water, they can put you out of business, right? So I've seen it a lot where guys, really profitable in one type of work where they specialized in projects under 250, all of a sudden jump up and take a $2 or $3 million project with a faster timeline, not being able to adjust for that that cash flow, right? So not a good idea. And here on the other side, I see guys that play it way too safe. Okay, all too often where they don't want to take on any more jobs with fear of cash flow. Well, let's dissect that. Like if you have if you're looking at the numbers and, again, you're looking at where your projects fall, a lot of times we can take on a little extra work. We could take on that project. All right. We'd have to be smarter with our money and be able to see ahead that 3 months and when those payments are coming due. All right. But why not? I mean, again, you don't want to be held back by that, right? Because that can keep you kind of scared to do certain types of work. So the solution to that, all right. And I always like to look at, and Greg, we went through this a couple of years ago, but looking at your gross profit variability. Okay, so think about our sales forecast. All right, certain months we do really good, certain months are not so great, right? When we know those numbers, that now goes back down into these tools where I'm going to predict, like, hey, you know what? Because my production drops in January and February, my profitability will as well, and I'm going to try and keep those lines together. Okay, to keep the least amount of ups and downs in that, because again, we're here for profit. Okay, we're also going to do a comparison from years past, again, being able to flip back to these things very quickly. Okay, and it's very simple in terms of how we use this particular tool. It's based on the contracts that you've entered during a single month period. Okay, and what we're going to do is look at the original contract price. All right, any change work orders that we've taken on. The current contract price, again, applying to like the billings and stuff that we talked about. And then the original job cost budget, job cost sheet. All right. And the estimated change order. All right. Current job cost budget, actual cost. All right. The remaining job cost budget. How much money do we have to bill? How much money is owed to us? All right. Estimated job cost to complete. Again, that's going to be on a if you use the forms that I've shared with everybody, that's going to be on your progress billing. Okay, so how much have you billed? You'll be able to tell if you've underbilled or overbilled for that period. Okay, so we kind of started off all the training talking about how to use those payment applications. Okay, I recommend anybody doing bigger projects or bidded work or anything like that, we should always be using payment applications, not just a solid invoice. Okay, we're also going to be looking at profitability. Again, profitability can change during a project where you're predicting that your profits were, 30%, right? All of a sudden, because of inefficiency or something that happened on the job site, that profitability is dropped. Well, what's that going to mean to your cash flow and your business overall? All right. So this knowing that you're having a problem on that one job might slow you down from jumping on to the next, right? We got to get that back in order. So all of this is going to allow us to see kind of where we are financially at all times. Okay. The earned profit. So on every payment application payment, you should be removing the profit from that. And I'll just share with you how we do it. Okay. Our profit in our business, I use the old profit first model still on just the profit. It gets removed and it's actually owed to a holdings company. So on every invoice, our profit is removed and sent to our holdings company. If the operating company requires a loan, we loan it back to them with a higher interest rate. Okay. And the only time it requires a loan is if there's been a problem on the job or anything like that. That would be the only circumstances that the job would require a loan back from the holdings company. Okay. So again, a really good, it works well for me. You guys, you guys may do it differently, but that helps to keep everything in line and helps us to really, profit first, right?
So at the end of the year, your operating company is showing no profit then?
Zero. It's in debt. Always. I'm always turning over negative profits because think about it. A holdings company receiving regular reoccurring payments for large sums is far more valuable than a construction company with fluctuating margins, and to go and get capital for your construction company or electrical company, good luck, because you're already rated very low. So using a holdings company, all right, you basically are showing positive net income every single month, steady, stable, all right. Even if you're sending it out as a loan, that's still an asset on your books. So that you're so in that business, and then what you do is you flip that, you know, let's say you're going to, you know, buy real estate or whatever, you're using the holdings company to make that purchase.
Yeah.
Right.
I know. Yeah.
So it keeps you protected as well. The other thing we all want to think about is our operating companies are nothing but a massive liability. Okay. Everything, no matter what, I mean, something happens, your guys, you know, get in an accident and kill a bunch of kids on a school bus. There goes your business. Right. If you're storing money in that company, if you have like, you know, large amounts of money sitting around in there, like that's not a good thing. Plus the taxes. For me, it's a tax shelter, moving it and then creating a negative debt. Right. So I've been pretty good. We don't pay very much taxes. Yeah, especially in Ontario. Like that should be most contractors' first focus is, how do I not pay the government so much goddamn money? Right.
How are you dealing with holdback in this scenario?
Yeah, so your holdback is actually included in here. Hold on.
Like, are you just talking about on a $500,000 contract, every time you would bill 50, you're showing it as 50 in here, or you're showing it in as 45, and the holdback's in another spot?
So yeah, so this goes directly to my application for payment. So that holdback is included there. All right. So like all my holdbacks are there, and I'm literally just pumping, like mine's all connected to this. So like when we do our payment applications, it automatically updates this. So the key is never be underbilled. You want to be an overbilled situation with your builder. So why do I use a payment application? Because I can manipulate the numbers. So we talked about this, Greg, like doing these big jobs, I'm going to upfront get all the material there and bill it. I have 30 days with my supplier if I need them. All right. I'm going to use their capital to basically do the same thing the generals are. Okay. I'm not putting my cash in if I don't have to. Okay. And again, if you're using subs, like you have a delay in that week. So again, you can get very clever with this stuff, but the key is just like everything else. The more money that they owe you, the more leverage they have on top of you, the harder it is to get paid. Okay. No matter what, even if they like you and you know, you've done good work for them, most generals are looking at the same numbers. They look very carefully at these things because they want to keep your sub, they always want to keep their sub in a underbilled scenario, which they do. The 30 days keeps you always underbilled. That way they have leverage. They can, you know, drag you through the dirt. And if they take a loss, if their client doesn't pay them, oh well, right? So, and again, here's a lot of other applications for this. Okay. So, guys, that was just kind of the high level view of this form. What you're going to find is the videos that I'll be uploading will explain exactly how to use this, go through all of it. There's instructions here. By the way, Nick, you look completely blown away with this. Don't worry about it, buddy.
No, it's a lot.
Yeah. Don't stress. What I want you to stay focused on and to have a look at is our pillars. Okay.
Yeah.
You should not be focusing on 2 and 3s when you haven't got your 1s done. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So don't this is you don't need to have this in place. Your cash flow management tool will take care of this. This is when you're doing multi projects that are like high, you know, $200,000-$300,000 projects, a couple of them at a time, that you would really bring this tool in. Or again, you have projects in different states, right? So yeah, don't even bother with this particular tool yet.
Yeah, pillars for now. That's a lot. That's enough already.
Right. Yeah. So the big one for you is the labor burden calculator. If you just get that set up, that's going to make it really easy to understand your hourly rate, and that's going to help with your job costing. So that labor burden rate in your job cost form, now you can update and be very confident with it. The other is your overhead rate. What is your actual overhead? So those two numbers are like your most important numbers to make sure you're estimating correctly.
Yeah, they're not up to date. I gotta review this. They're not up to date yet.
Well, when you get done those things, you get a sticker.
Yeah, good. Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
So were we having two things? So there'll be a service overhead and a
Yes.
construction overhead?
Yeah, it's just I
'Cause-
couldn't squeeze it all into one. So I'm
that's
gonna
what I'm
have
trying to
another
understand.
training for it. So yeah,
Okay.
it'll be uploaded. Okay.
Thanks,
Very good.
Jay.
All right, guys.
you.
Have a great day.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.